Seeking Daylight Part 1 Journey to the Underhill Gates. Narrated by Million Quinteros. Chapter 5 Things That Shine in the Night. Something was chasing him. Lewis was sure of it. What exactly, he didn't know. He couldn't see through the thick darkness, but he felt it coming for him. Instincts took over. Picking his direction and moving his feet, he pushed to run faster, but his legs failed him as trying to move through sludge. Maybe he was tangled in something. He couldn't be sure. It was coming for him, though, getting closer, and now he could hear its footsteps. He fell to the ground, unable to rise to his feet. It felt like 1,000 pounds was pressing on the small of his back. The sound of the steps slowed to the pace of a walk, calmly approaching. It came closer. He could feel it standing there, sizing him up. He closed his eyes and tried to scream for the others to run, but all that came from his lungs was air. His eyes had somehow become stuck shut. He tried to force them open as hard as he could, still screaming without success. Lewis opened his eyes. A dream. He must have been asleep for a while. The fire had burnt down the coals, now emitting a warm glow just bright enough that he could see where Owen and Sophie slept behind him. The dream felt real. It had scared him, and scared him good. If he was being totally honest with himself, he was still pretty frightened even as he lay there awake, unable to shake the feeling that something was after them. He tried to reassure himself that it was a silly thought, only a dream. Yet his heart raced as he stared down the hallway, looking at the small, round opening in the door. He had no idea where they were or how he would ever manage to get them out of this place. If someone or something was to burst through that door, they would be done for. He would stand watch. There was no way his imagination was going to allow him to get back to sleep anyhow. An endless stream of scenarios ran like a movie in his mind as he laid there, his eyes fixed to the door and its porthole window. Maybe he was right. Maybe when Owen's mom or perhaps the school monitor noticed they were missing, someone would send a search party. Maybe if they kept the fire stoked and kept the smoke billowing from the chimney and upward out of the ground above, the fire department would come to their rescue. Then again, maybe the three of them wouldn't be able to find anything to eat and would slowly wither away to nothing. Maybe the water was poisoned. Maybe no one would ever find them. Lewis shook his head as if it would somehow shake the bad thoughts away. He began to think instead of Grandpa Andy, his father, and that passage he had written in the notebook. As odd as this all was, it had made some sense. Was this the dark place that his dad wrote of, where he had become unsure of his footing? Was this where he too had been trapped, lost for those years as a child? No way, that would just be crazy. Lewis saw something just outside the room's one small window, a faint blink of green light. His eyes must be playing tricks on him. He rubbed at his face with his hands and stared in its direction for a few seconds longer, making sure not to blink. There it was again. Now he was sure of it. He sat upright and watched as the light became brighter, the blinking faster and syncopated, until it became a nearly constant beam of dim green light shining through the door's round opening. Owen, wake up! He whispered at first, then a bit louder. Finally, Lewis shook his friend by the arm until he woke. What is it now? Owen growled, his eyes barely open. Look, out the window, Lewis pointed. Owen rubbed his eyes and sat up next to Lewis so he could see. His eyes widened and he jumped to his feet. It's coming this way. Fear rose in his voice. Lewis shook Sophie to wake her, saying nothing and pointing in the direction of the light. She looked curiously as the stream of blinking lights now floating in through the porthole and down the hallway toward them. They kept coming, tens of them, then hundreds, filling the hallway with a bright green glow. Fireflies? She asked rhetorically. There must have been thousands of them now, entering the chamber, swarming all around them. They had no time left to think. Lewis reached for what he had placed on the ground to dry, hastily packing it away into his bag. Owen and Sophie grabbed their clothes from the chair and the floor. We gotta get out of here. Sophie put her arm to her face to protect her eyes and ran towards the door. The boys glanced quickly to make sure they hadn't forgotten anything, but it was difficult to see through the cloud of blinking green lights. Lewis held his breath so he wouldn't get bugs in his mouth, put his head down, and made his way against the current toward the door. Owen followed close behind. Soon, they found themselves outside the warm confines of their temporary lodgings and into the cold night air. Sophie squinted through the cloud of bugs into the distance and at the flowing green river that floated toward them. "What do we do now?" A fog of warm breath left her mouth as she spoke. "We can't stay here. These things must have come from somewhere, probably from above. Maybe this is our way out," Lewis said, making the best of an otherwise bad situation. The others agreed that this was no longer the time or place to argue the finer points of their plan. The fireflies were everywhere, flying up their noses and in their mouths as they tried to speak or breathe. Sophie put her sweater over her face and did her best to run through the tall leaves, free from the swarm of bugs. The boys followed suit behind her. Again, they took to the painstaking task of maneuvering through the tall grass that grew on the far side of the tree, until finally the blades gave way to the dry and lifeless dirt underfoot. They followed the light, keeping a safe distance from the swarm. Their path led lower and lower, the tree growing smaller and smaller behind them as they walked. At least a mile more before the stream of fireflies began to dissipate, and the sunlight again crept its way through the crack in the cavern's roof. It was of little benefit to them now, just a beam in the distance, doing nothing to light their newfound path. The last of the blinking bugs crawled its way through the moss-covered wall at the far end of the cavern, just as the three of them reached it, and fluttered away. "A dead end?" Owen said, exasperated and exhausted, putting his hands to his knees and breathing laboriously. Lewis reached for his lighter, striking a flame and lighting one of his candles to see. "Maybe not." Sophie put her head to the wall where the firefly had emerged. Her arm plunged into the wall and disappeared to her shoulder, a large chunk of moss falling to the ground and revealing something carved into the stone behind it. Lewis and Owen pitched in, pulling at the moss as sheets of it crumbled to the ground. Owen ran his fingers around a seam in the stone wall, clearing its edges until they eventually had the whole picture. It was large, taller than either of the boys, and circular in shape. Besides having the general appearance of a bank vault, there was little else, if anything, to indicate that it would open. There were no hinges, no handle. 4 holes were cut into its face, equally spaced from its center. The bottommost hole was where Sophie's hand had gone through, and must have been where the fireflies had come from. A small and oddly shaped design protruded from the very center, and a type of writing or symbols was scribed along its entire circumference. The writing was not in any language Lewis could decipher. He had only English, and a bit of Latin from school to pick from after all. But the protruding stone shape in its center, that did appear familiar to him. "I've seen this somewhere." He ran his fingers over it, inspecting it closer with the aid of the candlelight. He sat down right where he had stood, cross-legged on the dirt floor in front of the wall, and pulled the notebook from his pack, flipping through its pages but finding nothing of particular use. Sophie put her eye to the lowest of the holes and peered through. "I can't see anything. What do you think is on the other side?" "Whatever it is, at least we be moving." Owen tried his best to answer as he half-heartedly pushed on the wall with his right hand to see if it might budge. It was solid, and Owen took a step back to look at it from a distance. Its circular shape looked like the face of a giant combination lock, like the one on their gym lockers. The symbols at its circumference like the numbers on its dial. Maybe it's not a language at all. Maybe it's a combination, a code. Sophie walked toward where Lewis was sitting, bending to see what he was looking at in the notebook, when something grabbed Lewis's eye. The flickering glow of the candle reflected off of the metallic chain that hung around her neck. "That's it!" He reached towards Sophie's neckline to remove it. She slapped him away and stood upright again. "Watch your hands!" "No, the chain around your neck. Can I see it?" Lewis reached toward her with an open palm. She pulled the chain over her head and the medallion came with it, out from under her shirt. Lewis went to the wall, fitting the protruding stone shape at its center into the holes that had been cut into the triangular medallion. "It fits!" Indeed it did, but nothing else had seemed to happen. Now what? It must have been meant to fit there, but why exactly? Certainly none of them had known the answer. Lewis held the candle closer so that they could see in the flickering light. There were little boxes etched along the outside of the medallion, 9 per side. All but one held a letter of the alphabet within. The last held nothing but a blank space. They took turns staring at the medallion and then stepping backward to look at the writing on the wall. The candle had long since burned down to a stub, wax dripping at Lewis's feet as they racked their brain. "I still think it's like a combination, a code, or something like that," Owen said. This time his words clicked with Lewis. and he began to look quickly, back and forth from the medallion to the symbols again and again. One of the symbols stood out to him, the shape of an oval with the capital letter I drawn through its center. He pulled the map from his pack and unfurled it on the dirt floor. There it was. The symbol had been written along the map's top edge, next to it a string of other symbols, about 100 of them, all which had its identical counterpart on the wall in front of him. "Give me your shoelace," he instructed Owen. "Quick!" Obviously confused, but willing to try anything at this point, Owen obliged, dropping to a knee to pull the long string from his boot and hand it to Lewis. "Here, Sophie, hold the string." Lewis pointed her to a spot at the center of the medallion that was still affixed to the wall, helping to press the string under her finger. "Don't let it move." He gave the other end of the string to Owen and pointed toward the symbols along the outside of the circle carved into the wall. "Put your end where I tell you and pull the string tight." He turned back to Sophie and repeated himself to her. "Don't let it move." Okay, I've got it. What are we doing exactly?" she asked. Owen was right. "I'll show you. It's like a giant decoder ring, a cipher, like in our games. Owen, I'll show you where to point your end. And Sophie, when I ask, read me what letter the string passes through on the medallion, got it?" They looked to Lewis, nodding their heads, but he could see in their eyes that they didn't really believe that his plan had any serious shot of working. One by one, Lewis instructed Owen where to place his end of the string, checking to be sure Sophie had held her end in place, and asking her to read off which letter it had moved to on the medallion. "M, Y, space, L, I." Sophie called the letters one at a time. Lewis scratched them in order onto the dirt floor with the pointed end of his walking stick until they had reached the last symbol that was written on the map. It read, "My life can be measured in hours. I serve by being devoured. Thin I am quick, fat I am slow, wind is my foe." Lewis looked up at Owen and Sophie. They had hopeful looks on their faces. Perhaps they thought they had found something that could help to spring them from this wretched place. Lewis knew his own face held a much different look, a look of exasperation, of utter exhaustion. There were so many new questions, but one answer he was now sure of. This must have been what his father had written of. This must have been where he had gone to for those 7 years as a child. Grandpa Andy was right all along, just as he usually was. Lewis's dad wasn't crazy after all, not the way it looked now, but he had little idea how that was going to help him in this place. "What is it? What's wrong?" Sophie asked, sounding concerned. "It's a riddle," Lewis answered. Can't wait to find out what happens next? No problem. You can grab the first 2 complete books now for free by visiting pjowen.com/free.